I live in a fairly well-populated city that is pretty well known for its violent crime. Let me preface this with, it's not like I fear for my life on a daily basis, but I certainly would not walk around at night unarmed or unaccompanied. I've had a couple of unnerving experiences, and I'd like to share this one with you. About a year out of high school, my best friend moved to an area of town called Riverside, which is more or less an artist stomping ground. Mostly young people, artists, musicians, college kids, and the like. It's pretty socially liberal, and it's a pretty significant homeless population. Most of the regulars are harmless, but we get a few transients that usually give zero fucks and are remarkably unpleasant. I had just pulled up to my friend's apartment complex and parked around back because the spaces up front were taken. The complex she lived in wasn't horrible, but it could be a real rat's nest at times. It was about 6 p.m., so it wasn't dark, but it was just starting to cool off. Just as I unlocked my car doors and started to step out of the vehicle, this guy appears out of nowhere. A middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap and a ratty t-shirt and jeans. Clearly homeless, but I'd never seen him before, which automatically sends up red flags. I had spent so much time in this area, we were on a pretty much first-name basis with most of the homeless. He gives me this hateful look and starts making a beeline for me, so I automatically slam the driver's side door and lock myself inside. This guy starts circling my car like fucking Jaws, looking in all of my windows, glaring at me and incoherently yelling. I'm pretty much freaking out, so I call my best friend and tell her this crazy homeless guy is pretty much holding me hostage in my car. She tells me she'll be right down. He circled my car over and over for about 5 minutes until my friend came around the building. She's never in a hurry. As soon as he noticed my friend come around, he shot her a hateful glance as well, and then wandered off somewhere into the neighborhood. Later that night, while I was at my local haunt, I described the guy to one of the cooks there. He told me he knew exactly who I was talking about. Apparently, this guy had approached him on the street earlier that day and started preaching at him. When my buddy told him he wasn't interested, the crazy guy flew off the handle and started screaming, I quote, "Your soul will be filled with black maggots and slime, and they will eat you from the inside out." My friend just looked at him like he was insane, rightfully so, and replied, "Damn, dude, that's not very nice." None of us ever saw the guy again, thankfully. Crazy preacher man, let's not meet again. I live in a somewhat small town with a population of about 20,000. I tend to stay up late, but this night was different. It happened on a peaceful night about 2:30 a.m. when I went out of my room and I headed into my kitchen to check if I had any chips. Unfortunately, I did not. I had a mad craving for chips that night. So I decided to head down to my local kiosk. I called my friend on Skype and we talked while I was walking. On my way there, I passed a cinema. Nobody was there except for a guard. I recognized him with ease, even from across the street. He was an old friend of my mom. So I thought nothing about it and proceeded to walk down the street. I turned the corner, and I was on my own again. After a few minutes of walking, a black Citroen minibus was driving right behind me. Then it stopped. And this big skinhead guy came out of the vehicle. He asked me in a rather aggressive way where I was headed, kind of like the bad guys do in movies. Now, I was very tall at the time, but I was only 14 and the guy seemed as if he could break my arms with his bare hands. I looked back at him, and that's when I noticed that there were at least 4 guys in the van. All of them were skinhead types. I got really scared and let out a, "What?" in a rather squeaky and nervous voice. Anyone would be able to hear that I was intimidated. I then proceeded to walk faster. I didn't look back at him nor the van for at least 10 seconds. Suddenly, I hear the van driving right behind me. Again, I got really fucking scared and started running. Then the van started driving faster. At this point, I was running faster than I had ever run in my entire life. I ran across the street over to the kiosk, and it was closed. This freaked me out. I was on my own. I ran towards some houses, and the truck was still right behind me. However, I managed to shake them off by running into someone's garden and hopped over the fence. By this point, I thought I was going to be beaten up if I got caught by them. So I kept running. I ran across the street and I hid behind a commie block. I peeked at them from the right side of the block. The car pulled out. I instantly got back in cover and hid there for 10 seconds. I then hear the car park right next to the block, and out of the van came four big muscular men. They had noticed me. I then ran across the football field, but luckily they did not follow me. I then pulled my cell phone out of my pocket, and I told my friend where I was, and that he should be ready to call the cops. He didn't seem to understand what was going on, and then I told him the whole thing, and I got home safely. I stayed up all night because I was unable to sleep. For weeks, I wondered what would have happened to me if they'd caught me. I think that they might have kidnapped me or beaten me up / stabbed me. This story still gives my spine chills, even though it happened over a year ago. I haven't been outside alone after 2 a.m. since. At least I have one hell of a story to tell. Oh, and by the way, let's not meet again, skinhead man. About 3 years ago now, I was a new mom, starting back to work. I was lucky because I had a former coworker, Rachel, who was happy to take my daughter for me during work hours. Every morning at about 8:30 a.m., I would drop her off and be pretty worry-free about her safety until I got off work at 5. At about 3 in the morning, I got a call from my boss asking me to please come in a few hours early to cover what was left of the night shift. She was desperate and offered me $50 cash to come in. It was only about 4 hours extra, so I told her I would if I could find someone to take Jessica to her sitters. My cousin lived about 20 minutes away, and I knew him to be a late-night gamer, so I took a chance and texted him, asked if he'd be willing to help me out. He said he had been drinking and that it wouldn't be a good idea, but he asked his girlfriend, Carrie, and she said she didn't mind. His girlfriend arrived about a half hour later, and I gave her a piece of paper with Rachel's address on it. With everything squared away, I went off to work. Around 8:20, something told me to call Carrie, if for no other reason than to make sure she hadn't fallen asleep and forgotten to take her. She answered and sounded a little relieved I had called. She had wanted to call me, but in my tired state I hadn't remembered to give her my number. She told me that she had arrived at Rachel's house and knocked on the door. An older man with a gray, unkempt beard and unwashed clothes had answered and eyed her slowly up and down. She had asked for Rachel, and the man had replied, "She is in the shower, what do you need?" That had thrown Carrie for a loop, as she'd been expecting him to say, "Who the hell is Rachel?" She'd never met Rachel, and she didn't really even know me that well, so she didn't know what kind of people I was okay leaving my daughter with. She was about to tell the man she was dropping Jessica off for me, but she didn't feel something was right, and instead she ran back to the car without another word to the man. Then she had driven down the road and pulled over and started crying. She told me she didn't know why. That's when I had called her. I asked her what the house looked like, and she told me that it was a small farmhouse with grayish wood siding, nothing like Rachel's house. And then I asked her what the address I'd written down was. It was wrong also. The man could have been harmless, and it's possible he would have corrected her if Carrie had tried to leave my daughter with him. But Rachel isn't a common name at all, and I find it highly unlikely that he knew one. Carrie and I both feel that if she had left Jessica there, we'd never have seen her again. When I was 19 years old, like most people my age, I was attending university and was living in a private house off campus with a few other students. As I am not the most social person and didn't go out very often, my daily routine was pretty consistent. Wake up early, morning lectures, lunch at home, evening lectures, and then home for the night. Campus was around a 15-minute walk from the house, which I made alone as my flatmates were based in different campuses. One day I was walking to university with my earphones in when I noticed a red car crawling along beside me. The driver was male, around 5'9", quite muscular with a few noticeable tattoos. He was staring straight at me, and so I pulled out my headphones to hear what he was saying. He asked me some general questions, name, what I study, etc. And then for my telephone number because he'd like us to go on a date. I wasn't interested, but I'm one of those people that has a hard time saying no, so I gave it to him, but changed the last digit thinking I wouldn't see him again, even though he claimed to go to the same university. It's pretty big. And he probably asks a lot of women out, so wouldn't be too fussed. I then hurried off and forgot all about it by the end of the day. A couple of weeks later, I was walking to university again when I spotted the red car turning the corner of the opposite side of the road. Feeling a little embarrassed, I avoided eye contact and walked a little faster, only to hear the sound of tires screeching on the road behind me as it made a sudden U-turn. Now on my side of the road, the red car zooms past me and comes to a grinding halt a few meters ahead. The guy gets out and rushes towards me. I'm shocked but continue walking until he blocks my path and begins shouting in my face. Why haven't you been answering your phone? I told you I wanted to take you out. I've been calling you every day for weeks and you haven't been answering. He wasn't much taller than me, but it felt like he was towering over me, really close and very angry. I decided that telling him I wasn't interested wouldn't be the best thing to do as he was so furious, so I said I had been busy, that I had had finals and had switched off my phone to focus on my work. He calmed down instantly, and his whole demeanor changed. It was almost a Jekyll on Hyde transition. He then said, "It makes sense that you're busy. I've seen you walking to campus every day. You're in the library every morning now. You shouldn't work so hard." The only new addition to my routine were nights spent at the library. It didn't seem weird at the time because he had told me he goes to my university, so I shrugged it off. He then claimed to be going to class too and asked if he could drop me off. For someone who reads extensively about serial killers, in particular Bundy, you'd think that I'd have known better than to get into a car with a stranger. He wasn't even offering candy, so I'm officially dumber than a 5-year-old. I rationalized that campus was 15 minutes away through fairly busy streets, which I knew well, and that he had calmed down now, so I got in the car. Almost immediately, I felt like it was a huge mistake. For the first few minutes, we were silent until I couldn't stand the awkwardness any longer. I asked him what he studied and what year he was in, to which he gave very vague, short answers, so I figured he didn't want to talk and fell silent again. Then it started. "I'm so sorry that I got so angry. I just really like you. When I spoke to you, it made me like you more, and I noticed you have really clean fingernails. Not like some of these whores that paint nails, you see. Fucking hate girls like that. You speak another language? I like it when girls speak to me in other languages when we're having sex." I laughed most of this off as I didn't know what to say, and he noticed we were approaching a side street next to my campus gate. At this point, I was thoroughly freaked out and just wanted to get to the closest, safest place I could find. He thankfully pulled over and let me out, insisting on walking me to class because his next lecture was about to start and was a few doors away. I slipped into the nearest room I could find, pretending it was my next class, after saying my goodbyes. Inside the room, I waited a few minutes, hoping he'd be gone, and he was. However, when I started walking to my actual class, I noticed he was leaving campus. After this encounter, I decided to change my walking route, which successfully meant I didn't see him again. One evening, I noticed I had a mass email from my course organizer warning all students, especially female, to be vigilant, as a rape had been reported the night before in an area close by. A description was eventually released of the perpetrator, which sounded eerily similar to the man in the red car, mostly due to the similarity between the tattoos described in the report and the ones I had seen up close. I don't know if he was caught, but I never saw the guy again. When I was attending community college to get my 2-year degree to transfer to a 4-year university, I signed up for a fiction class. In this class, we would work in teams of 2, trade papers, and critique each other's work. I was paired with a strange, rather thin young man with long black hair. He always wore it in a ponytail, had brown eyes, and an overall lanky form. We'll call this young man Manfred to protect his real identity. Anyway, Manfred always struck me as a really weird kid, but I always tried to be nice to him and offer the best feedback that I could on his fiction pieces. At about the middle of the semester, we began talking during class, and it turned out that we had a lot of things in common. I started to write off the weird vibe I got from him as being overly cautious. After talking with Manfred for a while, I guess he started to kind of crush on me. He wrote me this card saying that he wanted to go out. Now, I had started liking Manfred as a friend, but I definitely was not interested in dating the guy. So I kindly told him that I was not interested. He seemed a little disappointed, but there was no other outward appearance of freaking out or anything. A few weeks after that, Manfred asked if I wanted to hang out at his house. I had met his roommates during lunch in the cafeteria area of the college, and they all seemed pretty cool, so I figured, hey, why not? It would be fun to hang out, play some video games, and goof off. So I agreed to meet him at his place and hang out for the day. And this is where things took a very dark turn. When I showed up at Manfred's house, it took him a while to open the door, and when he did, he looked like he was kind of zoned out. I considered leaving then, but I had already agreed to hang out, and I didn't want to bail on him, so I went inside. As soon as I got inside his house, he locked the door. I could hear my brain shouting, "Run, run, run," as soon as I heard the lock click. But I wasn't quite sure what was going on as of yet, so I remained calm to gauge the situation. Manfred didn't really comment on the door thing. He just asked if I wanted something to eat. He walked to the kitchen and suggested for me to sit on one of the bar stools facing the counter. I sat down, and he started to make lunch, which turned out to be 2 frozen hot dogs. He put one in a bun for him, and the other one in a bun for me, and handed it to me. I looked at the plate thinking, this is odd. He ate his own hot dog without so much as flinching, like he always ate it that way. I kind of pretended to eat mine. I didn't want to aggravate the guy, and was still gauging what was going on. So then I started hearing noises from the room down the hall. The best way I could describe what I heard was a sound like maybe a couple different girls were in a room, and they were whispering. And there was a male voice, too, which was telling them to be quiet or something. Anyway, it was really weird, so at this point, I told Manfred that I had forgot I had a paper I had to write and needed to get home. But Manfred suddenly dropped his calm attitude and started to majorly freak out. He told me that I couldn't leave the house, that I needed to stay. I remained calm and asked him why. He said that I had needed to stay with him. It was best to stay with him. He kept repeating that I had to stay. I needed to follow him to a room. I shouldn't try to leave. Things would be okay. I calmly talked him down, looking around for possible escape exits and trying not to aggravate him or the situation as best I could. Eventually, I saw an opportunity when he turned around. I grabbed my backpack and bolted for the door. I unlocked the door and booked it outside to my car. I momentarily looked back and saw Manfred chasing me with what looked like a knife. When I got to my car, I threw myself in the driver's seat, started the car, and booked it out of there. I later reported everything to campus security, and they got the proper entities involved. The next day, Manfred did not show up in fiction class. I never saw him or his roommates at the campus again, so I assumed the police must have taken care of things, or else he decided it was too risky and got him and his little operation out of town. To this day, I'm not sure what Manfred was involved in, or what his intentions for me were, but I know I was lucky to make it out of that house alive.